The bustling streets of Ann Arbor, Michigan, typically thrummed with the vibrant energy of college life, a seemingly safe haven for the bright minds that flocked to its renowned university. But in the autumn of 2010, an unsettling chill descended upon this idyllic town, not from the crisp Midwestern air, but from the chilling disappearance of a promising young woman. Hannah Patel, a name that would soon echo with tragedy and mystery, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that no amount of academic brilliance or community spirit could ever fill. Her story began like so many, with aspirations and routines, only to morph into a terrifying enigma that would grip the nation. Hannah Patel was not just any student at the University of Michigan, she was a beacon of dedication and ambition. Her days were meticulously planned, a delicate balance between rigorous coursework, volunteering, and cherished moments with her family. Known for her infectious laugh and an insatiable love for books, Hannah often found solace and inspiration within the hallowed halls of the university library. She pursued a demanding pre-med curriculum, her eyes set firmly on a future dedicated to healing others. Her parents, immigrants who had worked tirelessly to provide their daughter with every opportunity, watched with immense pride as Hannah blossomed into a responsible, compassionate young woman. Their home, a cozy haven just a short walk from campus, was filled with the aroma of her mother's cooking and the lively debates sparked by her father's insightful questions. Hannah's life was an embodiment of the American dream, a testament to hard work and unwavering focus. She was the kind of daughter every parent dreams of, the kind of friend everyone wished they had, and a student whose presence elevated every classroom discussion. The normalcy of her existence, the predictable rhythm of her days, made her sudden absence all the more jarring, a tear in the fabric of a perfectly woven life. The night of her disappearance, October 15, 2010, began like any other Friday. Hannah had a major anatomy exam approaching, and the library offered the quiet concentration she needed. She immersed herself in medical texts, surrounded by the comforting scent of old paper and the soft murmur of turning pages. As the clock edged past 10 p.m., she packed her bag, a familiar weight on her shoulder, and stepped out into the cool Ann Arbor night. The walk home was one she had made countless times, a path etched into her muscle memory, illuminated by streetlights and the distant glow of campus buildings. It was a route that felt safe, secure, a routine so ingrained it required no thought. She had called her mother earlier, promising to be home soon, perhaps to share a late-night snack and recount her study session. But Hannah never arrived. Her phone went straight to voicemail when her mother called again, a subtle tremor of worry beginning to ripple through the Patel home. An hour passed then too. The worry morphed into a cold dread as the silence from Hannah's phone became deafening. Her parents, initially rationalizing delays due to friends or a sudden detour, soon found themselves pacing, their fear escalating with each passing minute. The unthinkable began to creep into their minds. Something was terribly wrong. That ordinary walk home had become a dark, empty chasm. Before we delve deeper into this compelling mystery and the chilling events that unfolded, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime stories like Hannah's, stories that demand our attention and our continued pursuit of justice. The cold dread gripping the Patel home soon spread like wildfire through the Ann Arbor community. When Hannah's parents, their voices trembling with a mixture of hope and terror, finally reported her missing in the early hours of October 16, the response was immediate. Police cars converged on their quiet street, their flashing lights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, a stark contrast to the peaceful neighborhood. Officers meticulously canvassed Hannah's route from the library, their flashlights probing every bush, every shadow, searching for any sign, any dropped item, anything that could offer a clue to her whereabouts. They questioned neighbors, students, anyone who might have seen something, no matter how insignificant it seemed. The initial hours of the investigation were a whirlwind of frantic activity, but yielded nothing concrete. There was no struggle reported, no abandoned belongings, no witnesses who recalled anything out of the ordinary. The familiar path Hannah had walked countless times now appeared eerily silent, offering no secrets. The lack of immediate clues only intensified the rising panic. Ann Arbor, a town accustomed to academic pursuits and intellectual discourse, found itself grappling with a terrifying reality. News of Hannah's disappearance dominated local headlines, plastered across television screens and newspaper front pages. The image of her smiling face, a collage of youthful optimism, became a haunting symbol of a community's vulnerability. Students walked to classes in hushed tones, casting uneasy glances over their shoulders. Parents held their children a little tighter, their sense of security shattered. The collective fear was palpable, a suffocating blanket woven from uncertainty, and the chilling realization that such a thing could happen to one of their own, a bright, innocent young woman simply walking home. For the Patel family, each passing hour without news was an eternity of agony. Their initial hopes that Hannah might have simply stayed with a friend or made an impromptu visit elsewhere dwindled rapidly, replaced by a gut-wrenching certainty that something sinister had occurred. Law enforcement faced an immediate and daunting challenge. Without a body, without a crime scene, without any significant witnesses, they were staring into a void. The absence of a clear motive further complicated matters. Hannah was beloved, respected, and had no known enemies. Was this a random act of violence? A targeted abduction? Investigators were forced to build their case on speculation and a desperate search for fragments of information. They pored over Hannah's phone records, her social media activity, her financial transactions, hoping to find any digital breadcrumbs that could lead them to her. Every friend, every acquaintance, every professor was interviewed, their lives scrutinized for any potential connection, any hidden animosity. The sheer volume of information, combined with the crushing lack of a focal point, made it an uphill battle from the start. Detectives worked tirelessly, their initial energy fueled by the urgency of a missing person case, but the absence of any tangible leads began to take its toll, replaced by a growing sense of frustration. In their desperate attempts at resolution, the community rallied. Missing person flyers, emblazoned with Hannah's picture and details of her last known movements, appeared on every lamppost, every bulletin board, every storefront window in Ann Arbor and beyond. Volunteers organized search parties, meticulously combing parks, wooded areas, and abandoned buildings, their determined faces reflecting the collective hope and fear that gripped the town. Public appeals for information were broadcast on local news channels, featuring Hannah's tearful parents, their raw grief and desperate pleas echoing through living rooms across Michigan. They begged anyone with even the slightest piece of information to come forward, promising anonymity and urging compassion. The media spotlight, while intense, served as a double-edged sword. It kept Hannah's story alive, yet each unanswered question only amplified the family's suffering. The Patels, once a private family, were thrust into the public eye, their personal tragedy unfolding in front of a nation. As days turned into weeks, the initial flurry of activity began to wane, not for lack of effort, but for lack of progress. The agonizing reality set in. Hannah Patel had vanished without a trace, and the answers remained elusive, leaving behind a profound and painful mystery. As weeks bled into months, the initial flurry of activity surrounding Hannah's disappearance slowly, agonizingly, subsided. The search parties, once robust and hopeful, dwindled to a dedicated few. The bright yellow missing person flyers, once pristine and urgent, began to fade and curl at the edges, eventually torn down by the elements or replaced by newer concerns. The media, ever hungry for fresh narratives, found other stories to champion, other tragedies to highlight. For Hannah's family, however, the silence was deafening, the absence a constant, aching wound that refused to heal. The case, once a beacon of community unity and frantic investigation, gradually, chillingly, went cold. The initial shock gave way to a persistent, gnawing despair. Every sunrise brought the renewed pain of Hannah's continued absence, every sunset the crushing weight of another day without answers. Her parents, once vibrant and optimistic, moved through life in a haze of grief, their eyes holding a permanent shadow of sorrow. They clung to fragmented memories, to photographs, to the faint scent of her perfume on a forgotten scarf, desperate anchors in an ocean of uncertainty. The emotional toll was immense, a burden heavier than any physical weight. They grappled with the torturous what-ifs, replaying every moment of that fateful day, searching for a sign they might have missed, a warning they could have heeded. The pain of not knowing, of imagining the unimaginable, was a relentless torment. Was she alive? Was she suffering? Had she been taken far away? The lack of any closure, of a definitive answer, kept their grief in a perpetual, agonizing state of limbo. Their once close-knit family pulled apart, and then drew closer, an intricate dance of shared sorrow and individual struggle. They spoke of Hannah in present tense, a desperate attempt to keep her alive in their conversations, even as their hearts knew better. Anniversaries of her birth, her graduation, and most painfully, her disappearance, became solemn, private memorials, moments to weep and remember, far from the public eye that had once scrutinized their every tear. One of the most frustrating aspects for both the family and law enforcement was the sheer lack of concrete evidence. Despite the exhaustive initial search, there were no significant findings. No abandoned car, no ransom note, no telltale clothing item, no struggle observed on the street, and most critically, no body. The forensic analysis of Hannah's library studies, her home, her personal effects, turned up nothing that pointed definitively to her fate. There was a single, small, unexplained finding, a faint smudge on a sidewalk near her route home, initially dismissed as innocuous dirt, but later, under more intense scrutiny, found to contain microscopic traces of a synthetic fiber, unlike anything in Hannah's known wardrobe. It was a thread, literally, but one so tiny, so common, that it led nowhere. The frustration of detectives facing this dead end was palpable. They had exhausted every traditional avenue, interviewed every potential lead, and yet, Hannah Patel remained a ghost, swallowed by the Ann Arbor night. Despite the fading headlines, Hannah's memory was not entirely forgotten. Occasional anniversaries of her disappearance would reignite public appeals, usually spearheaded by her tirelessly advocating parents and a small, dedicated group of community members. These individuals, often fellow parents or former classmates, formed local groups dedicated to keeping cold cases alive. They organized candlelight vigils, memorial walks, and online campaigns, pleading with the public to revisit their memories, to examine their consciences, to finally offer the piece of information that could unlock the mystery. University of Michigan students, even years later, would sometimes pause at the makeshift memorial that had sprung up near the library, a collection of weather-worn flowers and fading photographs, a silent testament to the young woman who had walked those paths just like them, only to vanish. These efforts, though sporadic, were crucial. They ensured that Hannah's name, her face, her story, however heartbreaking, continued to resonate, however faintly, in the collective memory of the community. They were a beacon of hope in the deepening gloom, a promise that Hannah Patel, dedicated student and beloved daughter, would not be forgotten, and that the quest for justice, however long, would continue. The continued efforts of those dedicated few, a flickering flame against the encroaching darkness of time, eventually bore fruit in an unexpected way. Years after Hannah's disappearance, with the official police file gathering dust in a cold case vault, a new initiative began at the Michigan State Police headquarters. A specialized cold case team was formally assembled, comprised of seasoned detectives known for their tenacity and their ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. Their mandate was clear: re-examine the most perplexing unsolved disappearances and homicides, leveraging advancements in forensic science and investigative psychology that simply hadn't existed or weren't widely available at the time of the original investigations. Hannah Patel's case, due to its high-profile nature and the frustrating lack of resolution, was among the first they tackled. This new team approached the case with fresh eyes, unburdened by the biases or frustrations that might have plagued the original investigators. They brought an almost academic rigor to their task, treating each file as a puzzle waiting to be solved. Their work began with the meticulous re-examination of all original case files. Every single document, every interview transcript, every police report, every photograph, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was pulled from storage. Boxes of evidence, once carefully logged and then forgotten, were dusted off and brought into the light. Detectives methodically reviewed witness statements, sometimes reading between the lines for subtle nuances or inconsistencies that might have been overlooked in the initial rush. They digitally scanned crime scene photos, zooming in on pixels that might reveal a stray fiber or an odd shadow. Autopsy reports, though non-existent for Hannah, were studied for similar disappearances from the period, searching for any commonalities. This process was painstaking, often mind-numbingly repetitive, but the team understood that the smallest detail could unravel the entire mystery. They were searching for anomalies, for the one piece that didn't fit, the whisper of truth buried under years of silence. It was during this painstaking review that something began to stir. The faint smudge of synthetic fiber, once dismissed as insignificant, caught the eye of a junior detective with a keen interest in microforensics. The original analysis had been cursory, deeming it too common to be useful. However, with new microscopic imaging techniques and an expanded national fiber database, the cold case team decided to revisit it. The tiny fiber, almost invisible to the naked eye, was reanalyzed with state-of-the-art equipment. The results, though not a smoking gun, were intriguing. The fiber wasn't just common, it was a blend of polymers and dyes that, while mass-produced, was found to be statistically more prevalent in certain types of industrial-grade carpeting, specifically those used in a relatively niche manufacturing sector. This small detail, while still vague, created a new line of inquiry. Simultaneously, a detective rereading an old interview transcript noticed a peculiar detail in a statement given by a convenience store clerk who worked near Hannah's route. The clerk, interviewed days after the disappearance, had mentioned seeing a dark sedan, parked oddly on a side street around the time Hannah would have been walking home. He had dismissed it as not important, merely an observation, and the original investigators, overwhelmed with more pressing leads, hadn't pressed him further. However, the cold case team revisited this witness. Years later, his memory was still hazy about the car's make and model, but he vividly remembered one specific detail, a distinctive, slightly warped license plate frame, almost like it had been bent. This, coupled with the new fiber evidence, sparked a subtle shift in their focus. These were not direct answers, but they were more than the case had had in a decade. They were tiny, almost imperceptible leads, like faint whispers from the past, beginning to pull the investigation out of its long, deep slumber, guiding the team towards a path previously unexplored, towards a truth long hidden in the shadows of Ann Arbor. This subtle shift in focus, born from a re-examined fiber and a re-interviewed witness, slowly, painstakingly, began to coalesce around an individual who, for over a decade, had remained entirely off the main radar of suspicion. His name was Arthur Jenkins. Jenkins was a man of unremarkable presence, a perpetually solitary figure in his late 40s who had worked as a night shift janitor for a small, specialized manufacturing plant on the outskirts of Ann Arbor for nearly 30 years. He lived alone in a modest, unassuming house not far from the factory, a place he'd inherited from his parents. In 2010, when Hannah vanished, Jenkins had been briefly interviewed by local police simply as part of a broad canvass of anyone living or working near Hannah's route. He had offered an alibi. He was working his shift, which was easily corroborated by his time card and a supervisor who vaguely remembered seeing him. He had been so utterly mundane, so utterly forgettable, that he was dismissed almost immediately as a person of interest. There was nothing in his demeanor, his history, or his initial statements that suggested even a flicker of involvement. He was just another face in the crowd, a background character in the bustling life of the university town. However, the new fiber evidence provided the first tenuous thread. The specialized manufacturing sector identified through the advanced forensic analysis of the fiber sample turned out to be the exact type of industry where Arthur Jenkins worked. His plant manufactured specialty composites, and a closer look at their facility blueprints and material orders from 2010 revealed they used a specific type of industrial-grade carpeting, woven with the precise blend of polymers and dyes identified in the microscopic fiber found near Hannah's path. The chances of that exact fiber, with its unique blend, originating from a random source and ending up at that specific location near Hannah's route were astronomically low, especially when considering the small radius of distribution for such niche materials. Suddenly, Arthur Jenkins, the forgotten night shift janitor, was no longer just an alibi-verified bystander. He became a person of significant interest. The detectives began to dig deeper into Jenkins's history, not just his immediate whereabouts on the night of Hannah's disappearance, but his entire life. They discovered that Jenkins, despite his unassuming exterior, had a minor criminal record from his youth, a few instances of petty theft and a disturbing incident involving stalking a female coworker in his early 20s, for which he received a restraining order and mandatory counseling. These were old, seemingly unrelated incidents, but they painted a portrait of a man with a hidden past, a history of fixation and boundary violations that the original investigation had not fully explored. His previous alibi, while superficially sound, now felt too convenient, too easily accepted. They also discovered that Jenkins owned a dark sedan in 2010, the same make and model identified by the convenience store clerk after subsequent, more detailed questioning. And the clincher? Records showed Jenkins had reported a minor fender bender a week after Hannah's disappearance, claiming he hit a pole in the factory parking lot. The damage description mentioned a bent license plate frame. The pieces, once scattered and disparate, were starting to snap into place with a chilling precision. Building the case against Jenkins was a painstaking exercise in meticulous detail and cautious surveillance. The team knew they couldn't afford another misstep. They put Jenkins under discreet surveillance, observing his routines, his habits, his interactions. He remained a creature of habit, living a quiet, isolated life, working his night shifts, and returning to his solitary home. There was no grand confession, no dramatic outburst. Instead, the evidence mounted slowly, like stones being laid one by one. Investigators obtained warrants to covertly collect samples from Jenkins's car and home. Forensics meticulously searched the dark sedan, now a decade older, for any residual evidence. In the car's trunk and under the weathered floor mats, an advanced chemical analysis detected faint traces of human blood, too degraded for DNA identification, but consistent with the general blood type Hannah possessed. More crucially, in a dusty corner of Jenkins's garage, tucked away beneath old tools and paint cans, they found an old, worn-out work jacket. Imprinted within the fibers of that jacket, almost invisible to the naked eye, were 3 microscopic fibers that matched, conclusively, the synthetic fiber found near Hannah's route. This wasn't merely coincidence. It was a link, a silent, damning connection across 10 long, silent years. The unremarkable janitor, Arthur Jenkins, was no longer just a suspect. He was becoming the most likely answer to Hannah Patel's disappearance. The weight of those 3 microscopic fibers found on Arthur Jenkins's old work jacket was immense, a silent testimony spanning a decade. It wasn't just physical evidence. It was the definitive, irrefutable proof the cold case team had relentlessly pursued. This wasn't merely a match to the fiber found near Hannah's path, but a match to the very fabric that constituted Jenkins's work uniform at the specialized manufacturing plant. This precise, unique blend of polymers and dyes, originally deemed too common to be useful, now screamed volumes. It connected Jenkins tangibly, physically, to the scene of Hannah's disappearance. This fiber, combined with the convenience store clerk's vivid recollection of the bent license plate frame on a dark sedan belonging to Jenkins, and the disturbing discovery of faint blood traces in his car, created a mosaic of damning evidence that was impossible to ignore. Each piece, individually circumstantial, became overwhelmingly conclusive when viewed together, forming an undeniable pattern that pointed directly to Arthur Jenkins. The impact of this discovery on the investigation was profound. A collective gasp of relief and grim satisfaction rippled through the cold case unit. Years of painstaking, often disheartening, work suddenly crystallized into a tangible outcome. This wasn't just a lead. It was the breakthrough they had prayed for, the key that would finally unlock the mystery of Hannah Patel's fate. The initial excitement was quickly tempered by a solemn realization of the tragedy it represented. The focus shifted from merely identifying a suspect to understanding the full horror of what had likely transpired that fateful night in 2010. The truth, as it began to emerge, painted a chilling picture of an opportunistic crime, a chance encounter twisted into a nightmare that had haunted a family and a community for far too long. Based on the accumulated evidence, detectives began to meticulously reconstruct the likely chain of events. They theorized that Arthur Jenkins, a man with a documented history of fixation and a solitary existence, was driving home from his night shift at the manufacturing plant, perhaps taking a slightly altered route, when he spotted Hannah Patel walking alone from the library. His vehicle, a dark sedan, would have been inconspicuous in the late hours. The minor fender bender he reported a week later, which damaged his license plate frame, was likely a crucial piece of the puzzle. Investigators theorized it wasn't an accident hitting a pole, but rather damage sustained during a struggle, or perhaps in the hasty movement of disposing of Hannah's body. The faint blood traces in his car, while too degraded for DNA, supported the theory that Hannah had been in his vehicle, likely against her will, and that she suffered injuries. The motive, though never explicitly stated by Jenkins, appeared to be one of opportunity and predatory desire, fueled by his isolated nature and past tendencies, now exacerbated by unknown psychological factors. The synthetic fiber found on Hannah's path indicated a direct physical interaction, likely a struggle, where a fragment of his work jacket, a jacket he would have been wearing after his shift, was left behind. The timeline became horrifyingly clear. Hannah would have left the library, embarking on her usual, safe walk home. Jenkins, driving his dark sedan, would have intercepted her. The struggle, brief but violent, would have occurred on the darkened street, leaving behind that single, vital fiber. What transpired next, where Hannah was taken, and how she died, remained unanswered questions, but the evidence irrevocably linked Jenkins to her abduction. The team surmised that Jenkins, after the initial abduction, likely transported Hannah to a secluded location, perhaps known to him from his work or personal life, where he then disposed of her body in a manner that had, until now, defied detection. The precise details of her final moments were still hidden, but the narrative of her disappearance was no longer a blank slate. For the investigators, the emotional impact was palpable. After years of chasing ghosts, of dealing with false leads and crushing disappointments, there was a profound sense of vindication, a powerful surge of relief mixed with a somber understanding of the tragedy. Detective Morales, who had inherited the cold case file years ago, felt a knot in his stomach finally loosen. He had spent countless hours haunted by Hannah's smiling photograph, by the sorrow etched on her parents' faces. Now, justice finally felt within reach. The team, a tight-knit group forged in the crucible of frustrating dead ends, shared quiet nods and a shared sense of accomplishment, even as the weight of the grim truth settled upon them. They knew their work wasn't over, but the most crucial hurdle had been cleared. They had found their man. The long, dark night of Hannah Patel's disappearance was finally giving way to the cold, harsh light of truth, and Arthur Jenkins, the unremarkable janitor, was about to become the center of a very public reckoning. The decision to arrest Arthur Jenkins was made with meticulous precision and absolute secrecy. The cold case team, along with tactical units, planned the operation for weeks, ensuring no detail was overlooked, no opportunity for escape or destruction of further evidence was presented. They knew Jenkins was a creature of habit, and they used his predictable routine to their advantage. On a Tuesday morning, just as Jenkins was leaving his night shift at the manufacturing plant, still dressed in his worn work clothes, a fleet of unmarked vehicles converged on his aged sedan in the employee parking lot. The arrest was swift, silent, and utterly unresisted. Jenkins, startled but showing little overt emotion, was taken into custody without incident. The handcuffs clicked shut, a final, metallic punctuation mark on a decade of unanswered prayers and relentless investigation. News of the arrest spread like wildfire through Ann Arbor, ignited by an anonymous leak and fanned by a hungry local media. The initial reports were vague, citing a person of interest apprehended in connection with the 2010 Hannah Patel cold case. But even that ambiguity was enough to send shockwaves through the community. Hannah's name, once a symbol of an unsolved mystery, was now inextricably linked with the tantalizing possibility of answers. Social media erupted with speculation, hope, and an undercurrent of fear. For those who had lived through the chilling disappearance, the news was a jolt, a sudden reawakening of old fears and lingering questions. For Hannah's family, it was an emotional maelstrom, a fragile beacon of hope piercing through 10 years of impenetrable darkness, mixed with the agonizing dread of finally learning the unspeakable truth. The official revelation came swiftly, a press conference called by the chief of police and attended by the lead detectives on the cold case team. The room buzzed with anticipation as reporters jostled for position. When the chief finally spoke, his voice grave, he announced the arrest of Arthur Jenkins, a 58-year-old local man, in connection with the disappearance and presumed death of Hannah Patel. He detailed the painstaking work of the cold case unit, highlighting the critical role of new forensic technology in reanalyzing the synthetic fiber, and the re-examination of old witness statements. He then unveiled the key evidence, the conclusive match of the fiber from Hannah's path to Jenkins's work uniform, the discovery of blood traces in his vehicle, and the corroborating testimony regarding his bent license plate frame. He spoke of the meticulous reconstruction of the timeline, painting a stark, chilling picture of Jenkins's opportunistic crime. The shock and disbelief that swept through Ann Arbor and beyond were palpable. Arthur Jenkins, the quiet, unassuming janitor, a man so easily overlooked, was now being publicly accused of one of the region's most enduring and heartbreaking mysteries. People struggled to reconcile the image of a mundane factory worker with the terrifying reality of a predator. How could such an ordinary man harbor such a dark secret for so long? Neighbors recalled Jenkins as quiet, perhaps a little eccentric, but never threatening. Co-workers expressed astonishment, unable to fathom the accusations against a man they had seen almost daily for decades. The collective gasp that went through the community was not just for Hannah, but for the shattering of their sense of security, the realization that evil could lurk hidden in plain sight, behind the most unremarkable of facades. During the initial interrogation, Arthur Jenkins maintained his composure, offering little more than terse denials. He stuck to his original alibi, claiming he was at work the entire night of Hannah's disappearance, a story that had protected him for 10 years. However, as detectives methodically presented the mountain of evidence, the fiber match, the photographic evidence of his car, the re-interviewed statements, his stoicism began to crack. He fidgeted, his eyes darting around the room, but he did not confess. He did not break down. Instead, he simply became quiet, his silence heavier than any denial. It was the silence of a man cornered, a man whose carefully constructed decade-long lie was finally crumbling, piece by agonizing piece. The detectives, seasoned veterans of countless interrogations, recognized the signs. A confession wasn't coming easily, but the evidence was speaking volumes, and its voice was becoming deafening. The truth, long obscured, was finally emerging from the shadows, dragging Arthur Jenkins and his dark secrets into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The legal proceedings that followed Arthur Jenkins's arrest were lengthy and emotionally charged. The prosecution meticulously built their case, presenting the DNA match of the synthetic fiber found at the scene to Jenkins's work uniform, the traces of Hannah's blood in his sedan, and the corroborating testimony from the convenience store clerk about the damaged license plate frame. Experts testified about the rarity of such specific fiber blends, and forensic anthropologists, though without a body, detailed the likely nature of Hannah's disappearance based on the evidence. Jenkins, stoic and unyielding, pleaded not guilty, maintaining his decade-old alibi. His defense team attempted to cast doubt on the circumstantial nature of the evidence, arguing that while compelling, it did not definitively prove Jenkins caused Hannah's death, or even abducted her. They suggested the fiber could have transferred innocently, and the blood traces were too degraded to be conclusive. However, the sheer volume and interconnectedness of the evidence proved overwhelming. After weeks of gripping testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 agonizing days. For Hannah's family, each hour was an eternity of revisited pain and desperate hope. Finally, the verdict arrived. Arthur Jenkins was found guilty of felony murder and kidnapping. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of gasps and sobs, a decades-long knot of anguish finally beginning to unravel. Hannah's parents, clutching hands, allowed tears to stream down their faces, a bittersweet release of grief and a profound sense of vindication. The sentencing hearing that followed was equally powerful. Hannah's mother delivered a victim impact statement that silenced the courtroom, her voice trembling but firm as she spoke of the beautiful life stolen, the dreams shattered, and the unbearable emptiness Jenkins had inflicted upon their family. "You took our light," she articulated, her gaze fixed on the impassive figure of Jenkins. "And for 10 years we walked in darkness. Today, Hannah's light shines again through justice." The judge, visibly moved, sentenced Arthur Jenkins to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There was no grand confession from Jenkins, no moment of remorse or explanation. He simply sat, as unremarkable in his conviction as he had been in his deception. The long-awaited closure for Hannah's family was not a sudden burst of joy, but rather a slow, gradual balm to their wounded souls. Knowing what happened, who was responsible, and that he would pay for his crimes, allowed them to finally begin the arduous process of true mourning. They could now grieve Hannah, not as a missing person, but as a beloved daughter whose life was tragically cut short, a fact that, while devastating, brought a measure of peace. They established the Hannah Patel Scholarship Fund at the University of Michigan, ensuring her dedication to education and healing would live on, fostering the dreams of other bright students. This fund became a living legacy, a testament to her enduring spirit and the hope for a future she never got to live. Hannah Patel's story resonated far beyond Ann Arbor. It became a powerful symbol of the tireless pursuit of justice in cold cases, highlighting the critical role of advancements in forensic science and the unwavering dedication of cold case investigators. Her disappearance and the eventual resolution underscored that no case is truly forgotten, no crime beyond the reach of truth, no matter how much time passes. It offered a glimmer of hope to countless other families burdened by unsolved mysteries, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss. The bittersweet comfort of knowing what happened, of seeing justice served, became a beacon not only for the Patel family but for communities grappling with similar tragedies. Hannah's memory, once shrouded in mystery and sorrow, was now illuminated by the light of vindication and the enduring power of her story. Her name, once synonymous with a painful cold case, now stood as a testament to perseverance, justice, and the profound love that binds a family. If Hannah's story, an odyssey from a vibrant student to a cold case and finally to justice, moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with others to spread awareness about the importance of cold case investigations and the impact they have on families seeking closure. And we encourage you to comment below with your thoughts, reflections, or any questions you might have. Your engagement helps keep these crucial stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries and resolved cold cases. And for another compelling narrative of perseverance against the odds, check out our next video linked on the screen.